Welcome to my channel, Joe, your cooking guide. I'm truly excited to get started so I can share some of the tips and techniques that I've learned over years in professional kitchens. If you like this video, hit the like and subscribe button as well as the notification bell for future videos. So with that, let's get cooking. So the recipe I have for you today is a beautiful pan-seared Atlantic salmon with a fresh corn polenta. I want to first start off by talking a little bit about the portioning on the salmon. This was a whole side that I cut down into about 3 to 4 ounce portions, and I opted to keep the skin on because you can see there's a nice little layer of fat between the skin and the flesh of the salmon, and when we're searing that, it's really going to add a lot of flavor. Also, when you sear on the skin side, it protects the flesh and keeps it really moist. So I have 3 portions for today, and we're going to season it. We're going to season it pretty simply, right? A little garlic powder, and we want to season up high, right? So the garlic powder really sprinkles over the entire surface of the salmon. Next, we have a little paprika, and we're going to do the same thing. Kind of let that shower over the salmon. And finally, a little bit of fresh thyme. And with the thyme, what I like to do is just put a little bit in my hand and really just crush it to release some of those oils, and then again, sprinkle from above and get all 3 of those pieces seasoned really well. Right? Remainder, toss back in. Simple. I'm not going to put any salt and pepper on the salmon right now. We're going to season it up right before we sear it off in the pan. So for now, we'll put this off to the side and we'll get to that later. Next, what we'll do is we're going to move into our fresh corn polenta. Right? So the way that we do this is I got a little bit of fresh corn, just a standard cob, and we get a towel. You could use a towel, you could use a paper towel, whatever you prefer, and really just spin it in that towel. And what that's going to do is going to release all the little fibers from the husk that remain on the cob. Right? And you can just kind of shake those off. It's important that you remove those because we're going to put this in the blender and puree it really nicely. So before we move, let's kind of clean up our board a little bit. Just kind of move that off. Now I'm going to show you how we take the kernels off the cob. Right? Got a really sharp knife. I prefer using a smaller bladed knife as opposed to a chef knife. I just feel that it works really well for this task. Right? So all we're going to do is just run down the cob and just let it fall into the plate. Right? And I used a plate because if you did it on your cutting board or just on your surface, the corn kernels just kind of move everywhere, and this allows them to fall within the plate. Just a little cleaner, and it's a little easier. Right, so we just keep stripping the cob down, and you'll know you don't want to dig into the core too much, but we just want to get these kernels off. Right, and another very important step is after you get all the kernels off, is to use the back of your knife and really just scrape the cob. You want to get a lot of that starch off, a lot of that flavor. Very important step. Right, so we're going to continue doing that until we get as much as we can off. And you can see on the back of the knife, it just gets really creamy, and it's going to add a really nice flavor for the polenta. Right, so we have that. We have our cob, and we can discard that. So I went ahead and did. This is approximately 3 cobs of corn, and I'm just going to add what I did here to the remainder of it. Now, a typical polenta would be with ground cornmeal. I've done this recipe in the past, and the first couple times that I've tried it, I just thought it was the most amazing polenta that I've had. And I think with the salmon dish, it just works really well. Right? So after we have all of our corn off the cob, we scraped it, we're going to move into the pureeing of the corn. So what I'm going to do, grab the blender real quick, and we're going to move into the next step. So we have all the corn that we took off the cob and we scraped. Now we're just going to put it into a blender. Right? Just kind of take that, get it all in there. If some spills on your board, oh well, not a big deal. Here we go. Some on the floor, not a problem. Get that all in your blender. And that's it. So we have our corn in our blender. And next what we're going to do, we're going to add a little bit of vegetable stock. Right? We're just going to pour that in the blender. And let's say maybe a 1/4 cup or so. Right? We're gonna blend it up and see if we need more vegetable stock. And I think that's actually going to be a perfect amount. I don't like to puree it too smooth. I like to leave it a little bit of a little chunky to give the polenta a little texture. So now what we'll do is we'll just take our pureed corn and move it into a little bowl. Look at that. Is that just not beautiful? I love it. And it's so simple. It's vegetable stock and corn. Okay, we'll get our blender out of the way. We'll move on to the next step. Okay, we have our corn, and again, before we proceed, we clean. Okay, now the other components of our polenta, 2 very simple ingredients. We have an onion, and I've peeled the onion, cut it in half, and for this recipe, half an onion is going to be perfect. Right? So what we'll do now is we're just going to dice our onion. Now you can dice the onion many ways. So on the onion there's a core. So you want to use the core to hold your onion together. Now you can dice your onion going in this direction, or you can turn it and you can go in this direction. It's really up to you. So for today, what we're going to want to do is just slowly start going down. All right, we're looking for, a small to a medium dice. Right? And then we're just going to cut this in half and go down. Right? Very nice. Simple dice. And when you get to this part, you can julienne it or do another cut and then just take it down into dice. Right? Easy. Right? We'll move that back into our container. Very nice. Okay, again, we move, we clean. Clean as we go. Okay, next we'll get a little chopped garlic. For this recipe, I would say probably about 3 cloves. And just really when you get to it, snip the top off a little bit. There you go. Not much, right? And we can just take this and just chop it up. No, doesn't need to be real fine, doesn't need to be coarse. Just kind of chop it up, and we'll make it a little touch finer after we get that done. Right? So now that we have that, we can kind of just chop it up a little finer. Right? And that's going to be it. Right? So we'll take that and we can add that to our onions. So now we're going to start cooking our polenta. So what I actually want to do is we want to sweat the onions and the garlic. We don't want to have a hot pan where we're going to brown the onions in any way. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually start with a cold pan, take a little bit of olive oil, just enough to coat the bottom. And then we're just going to take our diced onions and garlic and throw them into the pan. So after we have our onions and garlic in, we'll actually turn our burner on. And at this point, I'm just going to keep it on. I'm going to keep it on a high flame, and then once it starts to sizzle, we'll adjust it as needed. So we have our onions and garlic in, and at this point, We'll take a little black pepper, grind a little bit in there, and then I'm using kosher salt, but you can use a standard table salt or iodized salt, but I always like to season each step of the way. And I get the question a lot, why does your food taste different than mine? And you know, I follow the recipe, but it doesn't taste the same. And I think what that is seasoning, right? It's, you know, when you follow a recipe, they say add a teaspoon of salt and a quarter teaspoon of black pepper. But it's really seasoning along the way, and taste, taste, and taste. Right? So you can see now our onions and our garlic are starting to cook away. And you just want to keep stirring. And this will probably take about anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. Again, like I said, we're sweating. So we're not, the onions and the garlic, we don't want any color on it, because then that's going to turn our polenta a little dark. Right? So it's starting to smell absolutely amazing. I love the smell of onions and garlic together. It's simple, but it's just a great smell. Right? Just kind of move that around, keep stirring it, and you'll see, you know, what we're looking for is for the onions to be translucent, meaning that you can almost see through them. And we're getting very close there. Right? Just kind of keep, you know, you can shake your pan while you're stirring. Shake and stir. Right? And just go straight, forward and back. Right? And just stir with your spoon. Right? So at this point, what we're going to do now, I think we're just about where we need to be. We've seasoned our onions and garlic. We're now going to add in our pureed corn. Oh man, this is going to be so good. Right? And again, we'll stir. So you can see right now that our polenta is pretty loose, right? So what we're going to do here is we're just going to let this cook down, but before we do, we're going to season. A little bit more black pepper, touch more salt. Right? We'll put that in and we'll stir. Alright, and just keep moving that around. Again, move the pan and stir with the spoon. And get all the way in those corners of the pan. Okay, so while the polenta's going, we want to keep an eye on that. We want this low to medium heat just to evaporate some of that stock, and then you'll see it'll start to actually thicken, and that's really what we're looking for. Right? So we're going to adjust that heat, and then what we're going to start doing is we're going to get our pan ready for our salmon. You can see that our polenta here is starting to come to a boil, and at the same time it's getting pretty thick, right? And that's exactly what we want, right? We want this to kind of cook out. Let those onions and the garlic start to infuse into that corn, and just always adjust your heat, right? If you see that it's getting a little too, you know, it starts bubbling away, lower the heat, not a problem. So we have our salmon, or we have our pan for our salmon. Okay, we're going to let that kind of heat up a little bit. And we can now grab our salmon. Right? So the salmon that we seasoned with the garlic powder, paprika, and some fresh thyme. At this point, we can now add a little fresh black pepper. Right? Season our salmon. A little bit of salt, again, season up high. So you really ensure that you season the entire surface of the salmon. Polenta's looking fantastic, thickening it up nicely. Our pan starting to heat. So how you know if your pan is hot enough? You see how that oil really starts to shimmy a little bit? Right? It's pretty darn close. We're going to add a little touch more oil. Right? And just move that around. You really want to make sure that the entire surface of your pan is coated with oil. right? And you can see our polenta is starting to bubble away, smelling amazing. Okay, so we're going to start our salmon. What you want to hear? You want to hear that sizzle. That's when you know your oil is hot enough, right? And when you put the salmon in, you want to put it in and let it fall away from you, right? And that'll prevent any oil splattering up on yourself and burning, right? So we want to lower our heat just a touch, right? And what we're looking for is, the beautiful thing with salmon and seafood is you know when you need to flip it, because if you see right here, you can see that it's starting to cook. And ultimately what we want is we want it to come up about halfway up or close to it before we flip the salmon, right? So we're going to let that go. We're going to get a little bit of pepper on the back side or the skin side. Take a little bit of salt and season the back. Beautiful. All right, salmon is looking lovely. Smelling fantastic. I'm loving that. I am really loving the way that's looking. So we don't want to touch it. You know, when I see, you know, some people when they cook salmon or fish or meat, they put it in and they want to shake, right? That's cool. But what you want to do is if your pan was hot enough and you put in enough oil, they don't stick. And that's what we want. So we're not going to touch this. We're going to let it go a little bit more. I've lowered the heat to about a medium. Our polenta is looking great. So we're getting pretty close. And you can see it's almost halfway up the salmon on this piece. Right? So we're going to let this go for a touch more. Kind of move these around. Fantastic. Looking good. We're going to go back to our polenta, because we're getting pretty close here. You see how much that's thickened up? You see how nice that is? Right? Salmon's looking good. And what we want to do now is we want to taste our polenta. See if it needs more seasoning. Wow. That is fantastic. It's got a little sweetness to it. You taste the garlic. Needs a little bit more salt, so we'll do that. And I think we are going to be pretty close on this polenta. All right, so let's just stir that, get that salt and pepper in there. All right, and you see how much thicker that's gotten from when we first poured it in. Right, salmon. I think it's ready to flip. All right, so now we're going to flip it onto the skin side. Look at that. That is lovely right there. We're going to take that, again, flip. Look how beautiful that is. We'll take it and flip. Right? You bend a little corner, no big deal. And that paprika really helps to brown the salmon, give it not only great flavor, but great color as well. So we're going to let that go. We probably have about another, I would say 3-4 minutes on our salmon. And our polenta, you can see it's looking quite tasty. I am loving the way that's looking. We're going to let that go. Our salmon is looking great. Now another little thing that you can do, and what really helps enhance the flavor on your salmon is we're going to take a few knobs of butter. All right, we're going to take a few knobs of butter and just kind of put it off, put it in the pan there, right? And then just take a little spoon here that we have, and just let that, and just start basting our salmon. Look at that. Look how lovely that is. Our polenta, pretty darn close there. I'm just going to turn that down, right? Really looking nice. Really looking nice. Take that and just keep basting your salmon. Look how lovely that is. All right? And you don't have to put the butter, but This is just kind of a little pro tip. Enhances the flavor, keeps it really moist when cooking. All right, so we're going to kind of just let that keep chilling out there. It is pretty darn close, right? And the thing that's happening here, I don't know if you can see that, but that butter is starting to turn brown. And that just adds a whole different level of flavor, right? So we're going to let that salmon go. I would say that's probably got about another 30 seconds or so. The smell is just amazing, absolutely amazing. All right, our polenta looking good. I think what we're going to do here is we're going to finish this, right? All right, so while that salmon is going, what we're going to do is we are actually going to finish up our polenta. And how we're going to do that is we're going to add a couple knobs of butter. Couple knobs of butter, and that's just going to add some creaminess to it, right? To keep that brightness, to keep that freshness of it. Look at that. Wow, that is looking fantastic. That is looking fantastic. Our salmon, it is donezo. It is done. It is looking fantastic. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to actually start plating up the salmon and the polenta. So let's move over to the cutting board. So we got to the final step here. We have our polenta that we've cooked. We added some fresh butter, some fresh cilantro. Our salmon. Does that not look beautiful? It's seared perfectly. The butter has caramelized. And now what we want to do is, before we plate it, we just want to take it onto some paper towel and just take off some of that excess oil and butter. Right? And then we'll take our pan and just move it out of the way. So what I want to show you today is two different presentations. All right, the first one is going to be just a single portion, right? So we'll take our polenta. Wow, that looks fantastic. All right, we'll take our polenta, and if you want your polenta to be a little bit more thick, just cook it a little bit longer. I personally like it to be a little bit more loose. Right, so we're going to take that, and we're just going to put it on our plate. Right, just a little bit. Right, this is going to be a single portion, and I think that looks fantastic. Lovely. Right, and then we're going to take our salmon. Again, just kind of dabble it, and just put that onto the polenta. And I love the way that kind of just spreads out there. Right, and to finish it off, I've got a little bit of fresh cilantro leaves that we can just take and just really just scatter around. No real order, nothing, just however you want to do it, a few pieces. Right, fantastic. And to finish, I've got something that is really cool, or I think is really cool. It's a little bit of smoked olive oil, right? And you can put a sauce on here, some kind of a puree, but I think that just finishing with a little bit of smoked olive oil, right? Let's just kind of get that coming out there. There we go, look at that, right? Oh man, as soon as it hits the salmon, you really smell that oil. That is fantastic. Thanks for joining me today. Hope you enjoyed tonight's recipe. If you did, please be sure to hit the like and subscribe button, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.